Jon Snow's parentage. For most of the story, everyone believes the same thing about Jon Snow. He is the bastard son of Eddard Stark, Lord of Winterfell, the one stain on the honor of the most honorable man in the Seven Kingdoms. Ned brought the boy home from the war in the South and never spoke of the mother, never explained, never wavered. He simply raised the child under his own roof and endured the quiet shame of it for 17 years, letting his wife hate the boy, letting the whole North whisper, letting his own name carry a mark it did not deserve. And he did all of this on purpose, because the truth was not shame. The truth was a death sentence waiting to fall on a child. Jon Snow was never Ned Stark's son. He was Ned's nephew. His mother was Lyanna Stark, Ned's beloved sister, the woman whose supposed abduction ignited an entire war and toppled a dynasty. And his father was Rhaegar Targaryen, the crown prince, the son of the Mad King, the last true dragon of the old blood. Lyanna was not stolen. She went with Rhaegar, and whatever passed between them, in secret, away from the world, ended with her giving birth in a tower in the south, while the war she had helped to start burned across the continent. She did not survive it. Ned found his sister in that tower in a bed soaked with blood, dying, and she made him promise something with the last strength she had. She made him promise to protect her son, because that child, a boy with Stark blood and Targaryen blood mingled in his veins, was the single most dangerous infant alive. Robert Baratheon had just won the throne by slaughtering every Targaryen he could reach, down to the babies, their small bodies wrapped in crimson cloaks and laid at the foot of the Iron Throne. If Robert had ever learned that Rhaegar's son still breathed, he would have crushed that child without a moment's hesitation, and Ned knew it. So Ned Stark took the truth and buried it. He let the world believe he had fathered a bastard, because a bastard could live and a Targaryen could not. And here is the weight of it. Every insult Jon ever swallowed, every door that closed to him because of his birth, every time he called himself the bastard of Winterfell and believed it, he was mourning a father who was not his, and a name that was a lie built to keep him alive. He was the hidden heir to the throne of the Seven Kingdoms, raised in the cold and the snow, never knowing that the blood in his veins was the very blood the realm had tried to exterminate. The one man who knew carried the secret to his own execution and never told a soul, not even the boy himself, Valyria. Before Westeros, before the dragons ever crossed the sea, there was Valyria, and Valyria was the closest thing the world ever had to a god made of stone and fire. It was a civilization built on the backs of dragons, an empire of sorcerer lords who bent flame itself to their will, who raised roads and towers and weapons that no living smith can reproduce. They forged Valyrian steel, blades that never dull and never break, tempered with spells that have been lost so completely that not one soul in the modern world knows how it was done. For 5,000 years, Valyria ruled without rival. It was the beating heart of all civilization, so vast and so powerful that it seemed it could never end. And then, in a single day and a single night, it did. They call it the Doom. Something happened in the 14 Fires, the great volcanic mountains where the Valyrians drew their power, and the entire peninsula was torn apart. The earth cracked open. Every hill that held a fire erupted at once. The sea rushed into the wound and boiled. In the space of hours, the greatest empire the world had ever seen was drowned in molten rock and ash and steam. Its cities swallowed, its dragon lords incinerated in their beds, its endless roads shattered into islands. A civilization of 5,000 years, gone before the sun rose again. And no one knows why. That is the true horror of the Doom. There is no explanation that anyone can trust. Some say it was simple catastrophe, the mountains that gave Valyria its power finally turning on their masters. Some whisper it was the enslaved dragon lords brought too low, a curse, a rebellion of the ground itself. Some believe the Valyrians had been carving into powers they did not understand, cutting too deep into the roots of the world in their hunger for more fire and more magic, until the world answered. Whatever the cause, the land where Valyria stood is still poisoned to this day, still smoking, a broken country of ruins and demons that no ship will approach and no sane man will enter. Sailors who drift too close speak of the water turning strange, of things moving beneath the surface. The smoking sea, they call it now. The White Walkers. Deep in the frozen dark beyond the wall, older than the kingdoms of men, older than the wall itself, there is a threat that most of the realm believes is a children's story. The White Walkers, the others, tall, gaunt figures of ice and cold, moving through the snow with eyes like burning blue stars, carrying swords so cold they shatter iron on contact. Where they walk, the temperature falls. Where they kill, the dead do not stay dead. For thousands of years, the people of Westeros have told stories of the Long Night, an ancient winter that lasted a generation, a darkness so deep and so long that the sun seemed to abandon the world. In that endless cold, the White Walkers came down out of the north for the first time, an army of the dead marching against the living, and they very nearly won. Everything that lived was pushed to the edge of extinction. And then, somehow, they were beaten back, driven into the farthest north, and the wall was raised, 700 feet of ice stretching across the entire continent, built to hold them out forever. And then the centuries passed, and the memory faded, and the White Walkers slipped out of history and into legend. Generation after generation, mothers frightened their children with tales of the things in the cold, and the children grew up and stopped believing, because nothing had come from beyond the wall in 8,000 years. The men who guarded that wall dwindled from a great order into a handful of criminals and outcasts, guarding an empty frontier against an enemy everyone was certain did not exist. But the White Walkers did not die. They waited. And here is the part that turns the blood cold. They are not a mindless plague, not simply monsters that hunger. They are patient, coordinated, intelligent. They move with purpose. They raise the corpses of everything they kill, animals and men alike, into an army of the dead that only grows larger with every battle, because every soul they cut down becomes another soldier in their ranks. You cannot win a war of attrition against an enemy who recruits from your own fallen, the Night King. At the head of the dead, there is one figure that stands above all the others, and to understand the White Walkers, you have to understand where they came from, because they were not always there in the cold. Someone made them. Long ago, before the first men and the ancient forest dwellers, called the Children of the Forest, made their fragile peace, they were at war. Men were spreading across the land, cutting down the sacred trees, and the children were losing. So they reached for a weapon, they took a man, a captive, and they drove a shard of dragon glass, black, volcanic glass, into his heart. And the magic in that glass transformed him. His eyes turned to burning blue. His flesh turned to ice. He became the first of the White Walkers, the Night King, made by the very people he would one day help to nearly destroy. That is the terrible irony buried at the root of everything. The Children of the Forest created the ultimate weapon to save themselves from men, and the weapon slipped its leash. Whatever they intended, whatever bargain they thought they had struck, the thing they made grew beyond them, turned on all of them, and became a doom that threatened every living creature in the world, the children included. They forged their own extinction and set it loose in the snow. The Night King himself is almost silent. He does not gloat, he does not explain, he does not rage. He simply advances century after century, building his army one corpse at a time, and he carries a purpose that he never speaks aloud, but that hangs over the entire story like a held breath. He wants the end of everything. Not conquest, not a throne, not vengeance. An ending. A world scoured of memory and warmth and life, buried under permanent ice and silence. He is death given a body and a will, the three-eyed raven, woven through the entire story, appearing in dreams and visions, and the sight of a crippled boy. There is a presence that watches everything and explains almost nothing. The three-eyed raven. It comes first as a bird with an impossible third eye, flying through the dreams of Bran Stark after his fall, calling him north. And when Bran finally follows that call, past the wall, into the frozen wilderness, he finds that the raven is a man, or was a man once, long ago. The three-eyed raven is what remains of a person who has become something else entirely. He sits in the roots of a great weirwood tree, deep in a cave beneath the earth, his body grown into the wood, kept alive far past any natural span by the ancient magic of the place. He has been sitting there for 1,000 years, and in that time he has become a kind of living memory of the world, able to see across all of time at once, past and present, tangled together, every moment that ever happened laid open before him. He can look back through the eyes of the dead. He can watch history unfold as though it were happening now. He is the archive of everything, the one witness who has seen it all. And here is what makes the role so heavy. The three-eyed raven does not act. He watches. For 1,000 years he has seen the darkness gathering in the north, seen the dead rising, seen the doom marching toward the world, and he has done nothing but sit in his tree and wait, because his purpose is not to fight. His purpose is to remember, and to pass that remembering on before it is too late. He is dying. The tree is failing. The dead are coming for him. And he has spent his last strength reaching out across the years to find one broken boy who can inherit the burden, who can become the next vessel, the next memory of the world. Because that is what the sight demands. To become the three-eyed raven is to stop being a person. It is to give up your own life and your own future, and dissolve into the endless record of everything that ever was, to sit in the dark and the roots, and watch the world through 1,000 borrowed eyes until your own name means nothing. The unburnt. Fire kills. This is the one certainty everyone in the world shares. Flame is the great destroyer, the thing that took Valyria, the thing that reduces the mightiest man and the smallest child alike to ash and bone. Even the Targaryens, the Dragon Lords, the blood of old Valyria, burn like anyone else. This is a truth so basic that no one questions it. Fire kills. And then there is Daenerys Targaryen, standing in the flames. It happens at the very edge of her story, when she has lost almost everything. Her husband is gone, her people are broken, her cause seems finished, and she builds a great funeral pyre, and she places 3 petrified dragon eggs upon it, eggs so old that everyone believes them turned to stone forever, relics, dead things. And then she walks into the fire herself. The whole camp watches in horror, certain they are witnessing a queen burn herself alive in her grief. The flames rise, the pyre collapses, and when the smoke finally clears at dawn, Daenerys is sitting in the ashes, naked, unharmed, without a mark on her skin, without a single hair singed, and in her arms and clinging to her body are 3 living dragons, newly hatched, the first dragons the world has seen in over a century, called back into life out of stone by the impossible heat that should have killed everything. The unburnt. That is what they call her after that night. Because the fire did not touch her, and no one can fully explain it. It is not simply that she is a Targaryen, because Targaryens die in fire like anyone else, and the story is careful to remind us of that later, brutally and clearly. This was something rarer, something that has only ever happened at the great turning points of the blood, a convergence of sacrifice and old magic, and the waking of powers that had been sleeping for centuries. 3 deaths, 3 eggs, 3 dragons, and a woman who walked into the flame carrying the weight of a prophecy she did not yet understand. The Faceless Men. In the free city of Braavos, in a temple that is also a place of the dead, there is a guild of assassins unlike any killers the world has ever produced. The Faceless Men. They do not murder for gold, or not only for gold. They murder as a form of worship. To them, death is a god, the only true god, the god that every other god is merely a mask for, and killing is the gift they give in that god's name. When they take a life, they believe they are granting a mercy, delivering a soul to the one release that waits for all living things. But the mystery of the Faceless Men is not who they kill. It is what they are, because a faceless man is, in the most literal sense, no one. To join the order, you must give up your name, your history, your face, everything that ever made you a particular person. You surrender yourself so completely that you become an empty vessel, and only then can you do what the order does. Because the Faceless Men can wear the faces of the dead. In the vaults beneath their temple lie the faces of countless corpses, peeled and preserved by magic, and a trained assassin can take any one of those faces and wear it as their own, becoming, for a time, someone else entirely, indistinguishable from the living, walking through the world in a stolen identity, unrecognizable, unstoppable. And here is what makes the training so quietly monstrous. To wear another face, you must first have no face of your own. You cannot become anyone until you have become no one. The order strips its recruits down to nothing, hollows them out, erases every trace of who they were, and the process is presented not as a horror, but as a devotion, a holy discipline. Arya Stark spends her time among them being told again and again that a girl has no name, that a girl is no one, and the danger is not that she will fail. Azor Ahai, threaded through the whole story, half buried in the sermons of a foreign faith, there is a prophecy older than any kingdom, and it promises a savior, Azor Ahai, the prince that was promised. a hero who lived thousands of years ago, in the darkest hour of the ancient world, when the long night fell and the dead walked and the sun went out, and who rose to drive the darkness back and save all living things. And the prophecy says that when the darkness comes again, Azor Ahai will be born again to fight it once more. The old tale of how the hero forged his weapon the first time is where the prophecy shows its teeth. To fight the dark, Azor Ahai needed a sword like no other, a blade of living fire, and forging it demanded a terrible price. Twice he tried, and twice the steel shattered. And the third time, he understood what the weapon required. He called his wife, the woman he loved above all things, and he drove the finished blade through her living heart. Her death, her love, her soul poured into the steel, and the sword drank it and came alight, a blade that burned forever, forged in the murder of the person he loved most. They call it Lightbringer, the red sword of heroes, bought with the life of an innocent. And that is the poison hidden inside the promise. The prophecy of the Savior is also a prophecy of sacrifice. Whoever Azor Ahai is reborn as, the old words hang over them like a blade of their own, because the pattern demands a price, and the price is always the thing loved most. Across the story, the followers of the fire god scan every candidate, every warrior, and every queen, searching the ashes and the flames for the one who was promised, and again they guess wrong, and people die for their wrong guesses. Children burned alive on the strength of a misread vision. The prophecy is real, Lady Stoneheart. There is a mercy in death, and it is this: whatever was done to you, whatever grief you carried, whatever murder ended you, it ends. The dead do not grieve. The dead do not hate. The dead are beyond all of it. This is the one comfort the world offers to those who suffer, that suffering has a limit, and the limit is the grave. Catelyn Stark was denied that comfort. She was a mother, first and last, a woman whose entire life bent around the protection of her children. And she watched that life come apart piece by piece. Her husband beheaded, her daughters lost, her sons scattered and hunted. And then came the worst night of all, a wedding turned into a slaughter, where she watched her eldest son murdered in front of her, watched a crossbow bolt take him, watched everything she had left in the world die in a hall that had promised safety. And in that same moment, her own throat was cut, and she was thrown into a river like refuse, and she was dead. It should have ended there. That is where grief is supposed to end. But her body was pulled from the water days later, and there was still the faintest ember of life clinging to it, or something that could be coaxed back into a kind of life. And the fire god's magic reached into that ruined corpse and dragged her back. And what came back was not Catelyn Stark. Not really. She returned with her wounds unhealed, her flesh gray and rotting, her cut throat a permanent gash she could barely speak through, and she returned with everything soft in her burned away. All the love, all the warmth, all the tenderness that had defined her, gone. Only the grief remained, and the grief had curdled into something else, into hatred, into a cold and endless hunger for vengeance against everyone who had a hand in the destruction of her family. The Valonqar. The most dangerous prophecy in the entire story is not about heroes, or the dead, or the end of the world. It is small, and it is personal, and it is spoken to a frightened girl by an old woman in the woods, and it haunts one of the most powerful people in the realm for her entire life. When Cersei Lannister was young, before the crown, before the throne, before any of it, she went with a friend to see a witch who was said to read the future, and she demanded to know what her life would hold. And the witch told her. She told her she would be queen, but only until a younger, more beautiful queen came to cast her down and take everything she held dear. She told her that she would have 3 children, and that all 3 of them would die, gold crowns and golden shrouds, every one of them buried before her. And every terrible word of it came true, one after another, exactly as the witch had said, until Cersei was a woman ruling a world where every prophecy she had been given had already come to pass in blood. But there was one more line, and it is the line that matters most, and in the show it was left unspoken, hanging just out of reach. The Valonqar. In the tongue of old Valyria, the word means the little brother. The witch told Cersei that when all her tears had been shed, when her joy had turned to ashes, the Valonqar would wrap his hands around her pale white throat and choke the life from her, the little brother. And Cersei spent her entire life certain she knew who it meant, because Cersei has a little brother she has hated since the day he was born. Tyrion, the dwarf, the imp, the one she blames for the death of their mother, who died bringing him into the world. Her whole life, she has been convinced that Tyrion is the one who will kill her, and that conviction has driven her to try to destroy him at every turn, to poison every possibility between them, to hunt him and hate him and wish him dead. And here is the trap folded inside the prophecy. She has a second little brother, Jaime, her twin, born moments after her, which makes him also, technically, her younger brother. The man she has loved her whole life, her other half, the one person who has stood beside her through everything. The Valonqar could be either of them. The prophecy does not say